all that's about so we can get into what you're doing. But Minuette is a part of the African American Craft Alliance, and we just spent a lot of time convening together, and a lot of the lessons from what Minuette is doing has to do with what we've been putting together. So thank you, Minuette.
And thank you all for coming in. Okay, so I grew up attending camp meetings, and as an adult, I thought it was something that everybody did. As I moved away from home, I realized that not everyone knew about it, not even my husband. He said, "What is a camp meeting?" And so I had to explain it to him, and then when he started going, it was like, he had one of the best times ever, and he still does. So I grew up in a small town called It's called Mooresville, North Carolina. It's north of Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is a picture of my family. Every fall of the year, we would go to all of these different events. We even went to an event called the 30th of May. But there were not as many social things to do at that time. And so but we were always excited as children. This is my brother, my sister, my mom, my baby sister, and that's me. And then cousin Gert, her name is Gertrude, but she always, I think my dad took the photo. So cousin Gert lived by herself, and we would always pick her up and take her with us wherever we went. And so it was, I'm thinking that this is probably one of the first photos that are evidence of me attending camp meetings. But camp meetings are religious, outdoor church services. I could say revivals, but I'll say a church service that take place usually once a year, and it's usually in places where people in rural areas. Sometimes we attended maybe 3 or 4. There are different types of camp meetings. I learned more about them as I went back to the tradition as an adult. When I started, I trained as an elementary art teacher, and then I decided to start working on a doctorate when I was still in the midst of teaching kindergarten through 5th graders. And I got this opportunity to move to Columbia, South Carolina to teach art education. In that position, I prepare art teachers for the schools. And my brother called and he said, "You should come back to camp meeting." And so I went back to it as an adult, and it was just amazing to me that it was exactly the way It was exactly the way that I remembered it as a little girl, except everything seemed smaller. And so we used to have to park across the street. I remember that our dad would grab us by the hand, and there was a lot of traffic, even though it was in the country. A lot of cars were coming, and sometimes kids got hit by cars, so they protected us as we walked across the street. And so just being in that space, thinking about ancestors, the people who walked on those grounds, I can still, imagine the footprints. I imagine some of the people who were there in that space. This is one of the earlier images. It's an engraving that I found. It was published in Harper's Weekly in the mid-1800s, but it was one of the only images that I had ever seen of camp meetings outside of the ones that people I knew had taken of them. And so basically there's a man who went to the campground at this particular event, and he wrote in a description of what he saw. And so the language at that time was a little different, so I don't usually share that. But again, it's evidence of a time when people, they had a break from working with the crops, and there were lots of farmers, and people lived in isolation from one another. And so they had this time of the year where they could take a break from the farming, and they could come together and worship. Sometimes worshiping in the woods. They would cut down trees, making sure they had some accessibility to water. And a long time ago, people brought everything they needed with them. They brought live chickens, they brought the food, they brought, it's amazing without having refrigeration at that time, how people were able to still cool the things that they needed before they would eat them. And so, again, once my brother invited me back, I started thinking I love photography and I take photographs, and I said, well, I should start documenting this myself. And I would always, a lot of times I would go to the grounds and I would see someone who didn't look like me taking photographs, and I said, well, why are they doing this? And I should start, and so I did. And so it's been a 25 plus year journey for me in terms of taking photographs. I have so many images, pre-digital, that I'm still working with because digitizing and all of that is very, very important. This is a photograph that someone gave to me of one of their relatives took this photograph, and I like showing it because it shows the number of people that you would see on the grounds. It shows the way that people dressed up for the event. You know, and you can see now when you go to, depending on the campground, you see that people still honor that tradition, that, you know, they're walking on holy ground. And so the older generation usually are the ones that respect that. And for kids, because of what is instilled in them through their parents, the fact that they actually go under the arbor, that it has to be instilled in them for that to happen. That doesn't happen as much nowadays, but it depends on the family and what they instill. So I wanted to just show you some of the, and also during slavery times, there were, you know, this tradition of people being able to go with their slave owners to the campgrounds. And then there were times when black people had to stand up by the front of the arbor by the pastors, and then, or they were able to possibly worship on the backside of the grounds. They have their own camp meeting. I know of one campground where they used to have two arbors, one for white people, one for black people. So I found in my research that there was not a lot written about black camp meetings. I had to dig through lots of information that basically I was looking for that evidence. And then when I found it, I was so happy. And also, I also realized the importance of interviewing the elders. And so I'm fortunate to have been able to, 25 years or so back, being able to talk to elders, being able to talk to my relatives, to hear their stories, to capture those stories through video, through photographs. And that, I'm still using that information when I talk to younger generations of children. But fast forward, this is probably the 1840s or so, that you know, the way camp meetings started out is, you know, people would just they would literally pitch tents. They brought canvas tents, and they would lay, you know, in there to protect themselves from the elements. And then over time, they shifted to something that was more permanent, a wooden structure. And then some of the grounds moved to having something more solid, like cinder block. So this is one of the old arbors. They call them tabernacles or stands. So this is one that I photograph every single year. So I have, one of the things I try to do when I go to the grounds is I want to take pictures of some of the same things over and over and over, so that if I had to lay them out, I could see how they change over time. And so that's what I did with this arbor. The people at this campground were able to raise money to get a new arbor built. You can see it has cinder block at the bottom, which gave them more permanence and more stability. There have been certain things that have happened over the years at the ground, such as weather, tornado that has torn down some of the tents. Usually the arbor is positioned in the center, and people camp around the outside. So it's sort of a circular shape. Sometimes it's square. Some have more than one layer of tents. There might be a second level layer behind the first level. And it depends on how long people have been attending that campground. So this one, so I've documented mainly camp meetings. I've learned about lots of them, but the ones that I chose to focus on for now, the ones in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, because I grew up in North Carolina, and then when I started teaching at the university in South Carolina, by word of mouth, I learned about locations, and over the years I have new family members, because I didn't want to be a person who went into someone's space with the camera, and they asked, do you work for the newspaper? No, I don't work for the newspaper. But I wanted them to understand that I grew up in the tradition, and that I wasn't trying to take their information, put it out there for people to see and use, but not feel invested in it. So I just continue to go back every single year. And now I go to family reunions. I just went to an 80th birthday party not long ago. So it's just been great for me to meet people. And also, you know, the thing that happens over time is, unfortunately, people that I've interviewed have passed away. So these are some of the arbors. These are, this is North Carolina. Some of the arbors are open around the sides because that in the August, September time of the year, it's not as cool. So they didn't really need the shelter from the elements so much. So I just, another camp meeting. This camp meeting has about 35 tents. We call them tents because of the traditional way of pitching a tent. Some people call them cabins. Some people say they look like shacks. But for the family members who go there once a year, this ground opens up and it becomes alive. It might look like an old, if you were to see it, people might say, wow, that looks like a movie was just filmed here because it's abandoned and it's shut down. But when the people come out, it comes to life. Some people go out in a week in advance just to orient themselves, and sometimes just be in the open air without the day, the busy days of technology and everything they have to do at home. So I have tons of pictures, so I'll fast forward this, a few of them. This is an example of 2-story tents at Mount Carmel, where, because of the space, you can only build up instead of out. Some of the tents have a little bit of space where you can walk through just like this. Some you have to walk like this. And some you can't walk through at all, it just depends. But then some of these tents, the one family owns the bottom, and then there's an outside staircase for another family for the top part. So I thought that was a creative way of being able to share that space with more families, because people are on waiting lists in order to have their own tent on the grounds. Some of the campgrounds were started by people who donated the land. There's a story of one of the campgrounds where this big storm was coming up in South Carolina, and this man's rice farm was in danger. So there was this man who was a newly freed man coming through, and they talked, and he said, well, if you help me harvest my rice, I will donate this land, and it has to be used for church services. And so I think that's one of the reasons why some of them still exist. There are a lot of them still, but some have not. Some have died out. Some have transformed in different ways, and I think that a lot of the ones that I attend, they still happen because they're not always advertised in newspapers. It's usually a family member saying, you coming home the second week in August? And then people know exactly when that is. So family members, the ones who are really dedicated, they may move away to California, to New York, but if they're dedicated camp meeting folk, they come back home. So it's a big family reunion at that time of the year. A few more tents. The Board of Trustees, they have a Board of Trustees at the campgrounds, and they're the ones who basically say, this is what you need to do. You need to, it's time for you to do some upkeep, or you might need to rebuild your tent. So sometimes they tear them down, people tear them down, and they build new tents. So I've documented some of that over the years, because I see the tents as being a part of the families, where someone might say, oh, I have an old door at my house, or I have this, and they embed that into their tent. So it's almost, if you think about a quilt, I feel that the tent can be the equivalent of a quilt for families. And you can see even this one, the cinder block beside the wooden structures. The front porch on the tents are very, very important. Because if you're positioned in a circle, then you can see, all the way across. You can see what's happening around. With some of the people I've interviewed, they would say, well, I grew up here on the campground, and I remember my parents would tell me that we needed to be inside before the sun went down. So just the same as if they were home, they had to be inside. And so my sister-in-law told me stories of this man who had a juke joint over right on the edge of the campground. All the kids would go over there and listen to the music, but they knew they had to be back inside the tent by a certain time. So those types of stories are the ones that I collect and I continue to collect. So this is a campground where they have painted numbers. So I believe there are about 50 some tents, but each tent owner has their number, tent number 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how you can identify who lives or who stays in which tent during that time. This man, this is in North Carolina, he was so happy in telling me his story, because he said that there was a big storm that came through, and his grandfather said, I'm not going to let my tent blow down again, so they moved over to cinder block. Some of them, I wanted to show that too, just because of the scale. Some of them they're very interesting. Usually when you first step inside, you're right in the living room area. They might have a long table with chairs, and that's where people also eat. And then the bedrooms might be in the back or upstairs. It just depends. This is a man, Mr. Shell Johnson. I met him probably in the late 90s at this campground, and he blew the horn at his campground, but also at the white campground. I think he blew that horn for over 40 some years. And even here, I think it's probably close to 90 years old. I asked him about getting someone else. He said, I've got to stop blowing this horn. I need somebody else to do it, but I can't find anyone. And so he was willing to teach the younger generation, but he had a hard time finding someone to fill in. But this is just a video clip that I took of him blowing the horn. So this is it's a pipe from an organ, and there's a man who actually works with those pipes to turn them into the instruments. And so when he blows the horn, it means it's time to come into the arbor for service. His nephew eventually took over. This is his nephew, who was probably late 60s, early 70s, when he took over the tradition. And since he passed, there's no one who is blowing the horn. We do have he's a retired professor from the USC, and he's come out to blow, but he's a white man, and he says, I don't want to take over, I want to be in the background. So he blows it, but you just see the horn. He doesn't want to be in the photographs because he respected Mr. Shell that much. But this was his nephew, Mr. Bowman. This is Miss Rigby. I call her Mama Rigby. I got to know her when I first went to this campground. I actually learned about this campground from one of my neighbors 2 doors down. Her daughter had married a young man who went to this camp meeting, and when I found that out, she said, "Oh, we'll tell you, we'll talk to his mother. You can go spend the night with them, and then she'll take you out there." So when I got there, they immediately took me to Mama Rigby's tent, and she was the historian. So she told me, so much information about the history, and she's the one who wrote that, the history about the rice field. She passed away in 2020, December 2020. When she died, she was so invested in camp meeting that everybody wore white to her funeral, and it was an outdoor funeral because of COVID. So they took her body around the campground, and they stopped at the back of her tent for a few minutes just so that she was there one last time. And so I got there early so that I could capture, her last time on the campgrounds. And since then, her daughter is a retired principal she's worked in New York. And so we're like sisters, and so I'm with her every year now. And now I'm also in the planning committee, so, we look forward to it every year. So, I didn't want to be, as I said, I wanted to be someone who gave back. I've printed some things, I've written a book, but there's more to be done. And so I'm working on the next stages of it. This is Reverend Collins. He was the host pastor at one of the campgrounds. He no longer does that, but he still preaches. Just to show you a couple of images of people under the arbor. This is what I remember as a little girl, that, young kids, if you're there, you might fall asleep. And I remember having my head on my dad's lap during the service, but we were under the arbor. And that was so important. For me now, I think back that it had to be important for them to take us there every year. And so when my dad got older and he was in the nursing facility, he was still able to go to one of the campgrounds, but I asked one of my friends if he would be able to use her restroom. She said, yes, he can come anytime. So I had to set that up. So he's the one who drove me out there because I didn't know all of the directions. And then we switched places, so I started taking him to the campground. So this little girl is grown now, and I don't know if she's going back to camp meeting, but I hope she is. The choirs are very important. They have schedules for the week. A variety of pastors come out. Traditionally, they call it circuit preachers who rode on horses and would go from campground to campground. But more recent times, they have hosts. Some of them, there are like maybe 4 to 5 churches that are affiliated with one camp meeting ground, and they bring their choirs with them. I actually went to the church where this whole group of people, they had their own camp meeting ground, and when I went there, when they sang, it was only really standing room around the outside because they attracted all ages. But this is another, this is just to show you a little bit of the singing. But yes, just to give you a sense of the singing that happens. So this is the Tucker's Grove. This is the camp meeting ground that I grew up attending, that I remember most vividly as a child. That a lot of times you see a lot of makeshift things. This is permanent marker on some sort of I don't know, it could have been some sort of plywood, but when you get, sometimes when groups of people gather, things can happen. Some people become unruly. There are stories about people who, there was this one campground where they had this tree, and then when people got in trouble, they would literally chain them to the tree. And then when they got enough people, they would call the paddy wagon to come pick them up. Yes. So, but you see here, no display of public drunkenness, no disruptive behavior, no loud music, loud mufflers, no motorcycle, border guns, capitalists, fighting, or poppers. Violators will be arrested, and they mean that. And then that was a more modern day style today, but it's still there now.
Swords.
And then I took a picture of the tent. It was rebuilt. Yeah, and this is a set of 3 tents. All of the people there decided that at some point they would all rebuild, so they just tore it all down, and now they have these like luxury tents. And they're about, they could be 8 years old. And then they started painting them on the outside. So some of the campgrounds, the Board of Trustees frown upon adding paint, because if you're not careful, you can change the structure. And they're historical places, so if you make too many changes, then you're taking away from the tradition and the originality of the places. This is indoors, inside of one of those newer tents. So people bring things from home that they no longer use, old televisions, fans, and then the window fans. I try to spend the night on the grounds as much as I can. I remember one night I was with my sister-in-law, and we were in an upstairs bedroom, which was nice, and they had an upstairs bathroom. You're really living if you have an indoor bathroom. Usually, like the portable toilets. But before that, they had the old toilets, the wooden structure types. And so when I first started going to lots of campgrounds, I'm not drinking much because I didn't want to go into those. But then at some point, you just have to get in and do it, especially if you want to eat good food and all. This lady, Miss Mack, she takes photos every year, and so she has a huge photo wall, so that's how she captures her history for family members and people who come in to visit. They can look, and she reminisces and tells the story of her grandmother who went by horse and buggy to the campground. And she's the one whose 80th birthday just attended. These young ladies were excited. This was their first year having their tent. And it's interesting that they made it circular because it was just a little bit of space, but they were able to manage fitting a tent in at the corner. But I don't have that photo to show you, but they were very excited. And this is when you first walk in the door, this is what you would see, their eating space, because food is a very, very big part of the tradition. This is another lady. This is when you walk in her front door, you'll see this bed, and she talked about the fact that that door at the very, very back is very, very old. So for me, just capturing those types of stories and history. There's a camp meeting ground, Mount Carmel, where you're able to take trailers or RVs. So you have to rent that space, but they call it trailer roll or something like that, camper roll. Some of them are, this is probably taken back in 2000 or so, so they have some really fancy ones out there now. And then you see the grid of the old toilets with the newer toilets. This man builds the tents on not the tents, I mean the stoves. So the stoves serve two purposes: to heat up if it gets cool, but also to cook the food. So there's some campgrounds where they do all of the cooking at home, and some people are really they mean business. They put together a recipe book, and they know who's responsible. Okay, James, you cook the macaroni and cheese. I'll cook the green beans. So they know who's bringing what foods out. And then at some grounds they actually do the cooking there. I've seen a man outside cleaning chicken and getting ready to fry it on the grounds. But these stoves are very interesting because they're made from an ice drum. And so this is real quick just to see how it works. This is Miss Walker. She introduced me to rutabagas. That was something I hadn't had. Okay. And just to show you with these stoves how many pots you can put on top. It's serious business with the amount of heat that comes out of those things. It will drive people outside. And that's Miss Barbara Washington with her rutabaga pot. This man, he usually, he has a hog. This is what he does every single year. His family knows that he will, take care of that. This young man, I saw him a couple months ago. I think he was at that 80th birthday party. But he calls this a drunk chicken. But some people put beer cans underneath and put holes in it. But he used soda cans. And that's how he was able to get flavor into the chickens. And that's just evidence of some of the desserts lined up. Lots of, from sweet potato pie to jelly cakes. There's a couple people who make these jelly cakes that are 12 layer. They're very, very thin layers with the jelly, apple jelly in between, or chocolate. This family they decided to have a theme year where they all, it's like a Hawaiian thing. So again, you see a little bit more of the modern with the traditional, so depending on the family, and as the younger generation comes up, sometimes we see things that are changing a little bit more. This man, I'm not sure if he's still living, but he and his sister, he had a photo booth. You could go inside and get your photo taken in big wicker chairs. And then there's the Sloans, it says since 1958. So they moved around to different campgrounds, and to people, you go in, you pay, and you get your photograph taken on the grounds. I've heard the history of some people who had photographers who were out there taking pictures every single year. I wish I had some connection to the photos that they took. So I'm still looking for some of the photographs. Mr. Neal, the man in this photograph, his family has a store in the front of their tent. So when service is going on, they pull the flap is down, they pull it up, and people, if you want something from their store, you go to the side door and knock, and you can buy something. But during church service, they're not supposed to have it open like this. This is a photo, I took this in 2001. I think this shows how you see the older generation really dressed up with the necktie and the suit, and then the other man semi-dressed, and then as you see the younger generation, the dress changes a little more. These women, this gives you a sense of how Big Sunday, how you see people dressed. I have a couple of color photos in here. I chose to stick with black and white mainly for this because I wanted to focus more on the tradition and not it to be more about the color can bring a different sense to everything. But this is just to show you how some of the women wear the hats and dress.
Wonderful.
This man, he's an elder, residing elder of the church in New York, and this was the first year he brought his daughters down to camp meeting. They're probably in high school now. This campground, Camp Welfare, which is not running now, but these girls, were out cleaning some of the dishes. They don't have running water inside. So they have all these faucets around the grounds. I thought it was great for them to be able to experience this. And sometimes you see, jump ropes. So you see, going back to turning cartwheels, that they put technology down because they have this open space where they can run around. There are adults watching. They might not think so, but there are adults watching what they're doing. This was back in 2001. These are my grandnieces and nephews. This is Mimi and Zion. That was their first year out at the camp, his second time, or her first time. And I just took that photo because she was just fascinated. There was so much going on around her. This, I had never seen this before, but this is the lady in the poncho was the pastor's wife. But they were, they were interacting with the kids in a way of playing this game. With the kids really love stay connected. So just ways of, capturing the tradition, but also looking to the younger generation because they are the future of the campground. This is my sister-in-law's brother Randy and his daughter Raven. She's probably a junior in college now. Yeah. So that was her first year on the grounds, and he was showing her around, and so she calls me her paparazzi because I take pictures of her. And then this is her a little bit older with her cousin who lived in Colorado at the time. That was his first time on the grounds. They now live in the area, so he goes to camp meeting every year. And he also has a younger brother, and he has two younger brothers. But just showing that the generations of how, they don't mind going back to playing in the dirt or the sand. I grew up that way where we played in the dirt. We went outside. We spent time out there. So when they go to the campgrounds, that's what you see young people do, which is it's refreshing to see them involved in something beyond the iPhones or the tablets and all of that. But that's the last photo that I have to share. So I do have a traveling exhibit. Right now it's in storage at the McKissick Museum at the university where I teach. I wrote a grant to actually get the exhibit, enlarged and framed, and then it came to a point where I needed to do some updates. So I have text panels with each photograph, and I give recognition to people. I didn't say a lot of names here because if I haven't talked about this in a while, I may have forgotten some names, so I don't want to mess up the name. But I'm at a point now where the last photos that I had printed were 2017. I've been doing this every year since, so I'm ready for the next phase of it. I want to do something related to children, such as a children's book, but also I have one book, it's called A Place to Worship, but I also want to do more. There's so much more to write, so much more that I want to focus on with this. And I would never have thought that this would be something that I would focus on for so long, but it actually helped me at the university. I wrote that book, and then I got promoted to full professor, so I feel that, something that I grew up attending. My parents instilled something in us. It stayed with me, and I'm trying to, make sure that children have a record of this for their future, because they will be the ones making the decisions. They will be the ones who will need to be able to tell that story to the next generation. Thank you. Thank you.